What happens when a CEO walks into his own café in disguise, orders a sandwich, and hears two employees nearly come to blows in the kitchen? Wesley Jordan never wanted the company. His father built it from the ground up, 8 locations, all profitable, all humming. When his dad passed, the business was left in Wesley's hands. But Wesley was more of a behind-the-scenes guy. Numbers, strategy, long-term planning, he was good at that. He rarely stepped foot in the actual stores, and that started to bother him. The last few months, customer reviews had dipped at one of the cafes, the 3rd location, the one in Oak Hill. Complaints about service, food coming out cold, some even hinted at staff being rude. Wesley had asked his district manager, but she brushed it off as a rough few weeks. Still, something didn't sit right, so he shaved his beard, wore a pair of glasses, and threw on a hoodie and old jeans. He even added a fake scar to his neck with some makeup his sister had lying around from Halloween. He looked like a tired, blue-collar guy grabbing lunch. No one would think he owned the place. He walked into the Oak Hill Cafe just after noon. It was busy. The smell of grilled cheese and tomato soup filled the air, and the line stretched past the pastry case. Wesley kept his head down and waited his turn. "Next," called out the girl at the register. She looked about 20, curly hair in a tight bun, name tag read, Brandy E. She gave him a quick, polite smile. "What can I get for you?" "A grilled chicken sandwich, no tomato, and a lemonade." Brandy tapped it in. "That'll be $8.75, Wesley paid in cash. She didn't recognize him. None of them would. None of the staff at this location had ever met him. He stepped aside to wait for his order, leaning against the wall by the drink counter. That's when he heard it shouting, not loud but heated, coming from the kitchen. "Don't start with me again, Greg. I'm not covering for your screw-ups." "I didn't screw up. I was told to prep the lettuce, not clean your damn station. I was slammed on register for 2 hours while you sat in the back texting." Wesley's eyes narrowed. No one else seemed to notice. Most customers were chatting or scrolling on their phones. But Wesley moved closer to the half-open kitchen door. One of the cooks, tall, skinny guy with a backwards cap, was glaring at a stockier guy in a black apron. "You're lazy, man," the tall one snapped, "and you're dragging the rest of us down. That's rich coming from you, Drew. You're always in Brandy's face trying to flirt when we're backed up. Maybe if you focused on work. You're one to talk. Who disappeared for 40 minutes yesterday during the lunch rush?" Wesley stepped back. His heart beat faster. This wasn't just a bad day. This was tension that had been building for a while. A young woman with a long braid walked past carrying 2 plates. She glanced into the kitchen and muttered, "Again with those 2. Wesley caught her arm lightly. "Hey, sorry, do they fight like that often?" She hesitated, looked him over. "You a reporter or something?" "No, just a customer. I've been here before, just wondering." She shrugged. "They argue every other day. Manager doesn't do much about it, says let him work it out." "Manager?" Wesley asked. "Yeah, Kyle. He's usually in the office or chatting with regulars." Wesley's sandwich was called out. He took it to a corner booth and sat, chewing slowly, watching. Brandy moved quickly between tables, clearing plates, wiping down crumbs. She smiled at kids, asked an older man if he wanted a refill. She was working hard. Drew came out of the kitchen a few minutes later, still fuming, and slammed a tray down at the counter. Customers flinched, then the door to the back office opened. A tall guy with slicked back hair came out, laughing into his phone. Wesley watched him walk right past Drew, glance at the tense kitchen, then head straight for the coffee station. That had to be Kyle. Wesley finished his sandwich and stood. He tossed the trash, then turned back for one last look. Brandy was helping a customer pick out a muffin. Drew was glaring at Greg in the back. Kyle was sipping coffee like the world didn't exist, and the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Wesley walked out the door and pulled out his phone. He didn't text, he didn't call, he just stood there, jaw tight. He needed to talk to that district manager again. But not yet. First, he was coming back tomorrow, and he wasn't going to be just a customer next time. Wesley arrived just before 8 the next morning, dressed in a plain black t-shirt, worn jeans, and a faded baseball cap pulled low. The sky was still gray, the street still waking up. He waited beside the side entrance where staff normally entered. A nervous tightness clenched his stomach as he checked his watch again. He didn't know exactly who opened, but he figured someone would show up soon. At 8:12, Brandy rounded the corner with a backpack slung over one shoulder and earbuds in. She paused when she noticed him. "You waiting on someone?" she asked. "Yeah, actually," he said, trying to sound casual. "I heard there might be a part-time spot open." "Thought I'd talk to the manager." Brandy gave him a once-over, then pulled out her keys. "You're early," she said, "but we could use the help." She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and held it open for him. "You got experience?" "Some," Wesley said. "Couple diners." "Mostly kitchen stuff." She handed him a pair of thin gloves from a box by the sink. "Kyle doesn't come in till later, but if you help with prep, he probably won't care." Wesley nodded and followed her into the back. The kitchen was still quiet, the metal counters wiped, supply crates stacked neatly along the wall. Brandy grabbed an apron and tossed one to him. "I'm chopping onions and peppers for the breakfast wraps," she said, handing him a cutting board. "You can rinse and dice." Wesley got to work. She moved fast, efficient, barely needing to speak. He followed her rhythm, not wanting to draw attention. By 8:45, Drew walked in, yawning and rubbing his eyes. He glanced at Wesley. "Who's this?" "New guy," Brandy said. Drew nodded slowly. "Kyle approve him. He'll deal with it," she said, not looking up. Drew shrugged and headed to the back fridge. Greg came in 5 minutes later, already scowling. He didn't bother greeting anyone. He walked straight to the prep sink and started washing lettuce without saying a word. The silence between him and Drew was thick. They didn't look at each other. Wesley kept his head down and worked. At 9:20, Kyle strolled in holding a smoothie, sunglasses still on. He glanced around. "Morning, team." No response. He spotted Wesley. "Who's this?" Wesley wiped his hands. "Heard you might be hiring. Figured I'd show up and work a shift." Kyle raised an eyebrow but didn't seem annoyed. If anything, he looked relieved. "You know what, that works," Kyle said. "You got a name?" "Ben," Wesley replied. Kyle gave him a nod. "All right, Ben. Prove you're not useless and we'll talk about paperwork later." Wesley went back to chopping. Kyle disappeared into the office. No interview, no questions, not even a glance at his hands, which clearly didn't belong to someone who worked a grill for a living. By 10:15, the place was open. The first wave of customers trickled in, mostly college students and retirees. Brandy handled the register. Greg and Drew rotated on grill and assembly. Wesley stayed in the back watching. 2 bacon wraps, 1 veggie, and a side of fruit, Brandy called. Drew grabbed the order slip but didn't prep the fruit. Greg noticed and rolled his eyes. "Seriously, you're just gonna leave it?" Drew didn't answer. Wesley stepped in. "I got it," he said, already reaching for the container. Greg muttered, "Figures." Brandy's voice cut through. "Pick it up later, just get it done." The tension was obvious, but the work kept moving. At 11:30, things picked up. A small lunch rush hit early. Wesley stepped onto the sandwich line, helping slice bread and load chicken into the warmer. He kept his movements clean, steady, just enough to blend in. "Ben, right?" Brandy said, passing him a tray. He nodded. "You pick things up quick," she said. "Most new people get flustered," he shrugged. "I've seen worse." She glanced toward the office. "Kyle doesn't really train anyone, so don't expect much." Wesley said nothing. He just kept working. By noon, the line stretched again. Kyle finally emerged from the back, but not to help. He leaned against the drink station, chatting with a woman in a sharp red coat. "I'm telling you, Oak Hill's still the best one," Kyle said, laughing. "Even with the staffing issues, I'm keeping it steady." The woman nodded. "I've heard good things. You've got a pulse on the day-to-day." Kyle took a sip of his coffee. "Hands on." "I'm here every day." Wesley watched Brandy dart between the counter and dining room, wiping tables between orders. Her shoulders were tense, but she never slowed down. "Can I get a hot sandwich and a lemonade?" a customer asked. "You got it," Brandy said, tapping the screen. Anything else? Behind her, Drew dropped a pan and metal clanged onto the floor. Greg groaned. That's the third time today. Maybe if someone rotated the trays like they're supposed to, Drew snapped. You're blaming me, Greg shot back. Wesley stepped between them before it escalated. Hey, either of you want to take 5? I can hold this for a bit. Greg wiped his hands on a towel. I'm good, Drew didn't answer. He just grabbed another tray and slammed it onto the rack. Wesley turned to Brandy when the line slowed. Is it always like this? She hesitated. Honestly. Worse on weekends, we're always short. Kyle says corporate's slow with hiring, but I don't think he even sends the requests in. Wesley nodded slowly. Why do you stay? Brandy shrugged. I've got rent, tips help, and I like the customers. But it's not easy. At 12:45, a group of high schoolers came in, loud and scattered. Brandy greeted them, but they barely responded. One of them knocked over a display of granola bars. Kyle, still chatting with the woman at the drinks, didn't even look up. Brandy bent down to pick them up. Wesley helped her. They come every Friday, she said quietly. Never buy much. Kyle calls them free traffic. Wesley glanced at the kids. One of them was filming on his phone, pointing it at Brandy. Hey, Wesley said, stepping forward. Put that away. The kid looked up. What's your problem? You don't film people without asking. The kid scoffed but lowered his phone. Whatever, man. Wesley turned back to Brandy. Her hands were clenched around the edge of the counter. Kyle finally noticed. Everything cool? Wesley didn't answer. Brandy did. Yeah, just clean up. Kyle nodded and turned back to his conversation. At 1:20, Greg took his break. Drew stayed on the line. Wesley noticed he was sweating, moving slower. You okay? Drew shook his head. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Got called in last night to close after another guy bailed. Wesley grabbed a water bottle from the fridge and handed it to him. Drew took it, but didn't say thanks. At 2, the rush died down. Kyle disappeared into the office again. Brandy sat for the first time all day, her back against the wall. You need anything? Wesley asked. She shook her head. Just 5 minutes of not standing. Wesley sat beside her, both of them quiet. You really looking for work? She asked. He glanced toward the kitchen. Not exactly. Brandy raised an eyebrow. Let's just say I'm looking for something, he said. She didn't press him, just closed her eyes for a moment, then the door opened. A customer walked in holding a half-eaten sandwich. Excuse me, she said. This is cold, and the bread's soggy. Wesley stood. Let me fix that. I'll make a new one myself. The woman looked relieved. Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything, but it matters, Wesley said. Give me 5 minutes. He walked to the grill, ignoring Drew's glare, and made the sandwich fresh. He handed it to the woman, who smiled and left. Then he walked into the office without knocking. Kyle looked up from his desk, startled. You got a second? Wesley asked. Kyle leaned back. Ben, right? What's up? Wesley shut the door behind him. Then he pulled off his cap. Kyle stared, confused. I'm Wesley Jordan, he said. Owner of this company, and I've been working your line all day. Kyle's face drained of color. Wait, what? Wesley's voice stayed level. I've seen enough. You're done here. Effective immediately. Kyle sat frozen. I'm not going to debate it, Wesley said. You've ignored your staff, mishandled customers, and let the kitchen fall apart. Pack your things and leave. Kyle stood slowly. I didn't know, you didn't care. That's worse. Wesley opened the door. Kyle walked out, face pale. Brandy noticed him heading for the exit, his bag over his shoulder. She looked at Wesley. He gave her a small nod. He wasn't done yet. But the cleanup had started. Wesley stepped out of the office, the door clicking shut behind him. The room felt different now, quieter but not calm. The staff had seen Kyle leave, and while no one said anything out loud, there was a shift in the air. Brandy stood near the register, one hand lightly resting on the counter. Drew was wiping down the prep area with more focus than before. Greg leaned against the cooler, arms folded, watching Wesley carefully. Wesley didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I'm not here to make a show out of this, he said, but I'm also not walking away. Brandy blinked, processing it. So, you're really the guy who owns this place? He nodded once. My name's Wesley Jordan. My father started this company. I've been running it for the last few years. Drew let out a short breath through his nose. Figured something was off. You don't move like a new hire. Wesley turned to him. You've been doing double shifts, covering for people who quit. You look tired and you're still showing up. Why didn't you tell anyone higher up what was going on? Drew shrugged. Tried, couple emails to corporate, never heard back, figured no one cared. I care, Wesley said. And I've been hearing a lot since yesterday. Some of it's unacceptable, some of it's fixable. Either way, it's ending now. Greg stepped forward. Look, I know I'm not everybody's favorite. I come in, do my job, and go home. I'm not trying to be anyone's friend, but I don't slack. I just get annoyed when other people drag us down. Wesley nodded. Then you understand why I had to let Kyle go. Greg's eyes narrowed slightly. Sure, but that doesn't fix everything. No, it doesn't, Wesley agreed. Which is why I'm staying here for the rest of the week, full shifts. No office, no title, Brandy raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Dead serious. I want to see what's working, what's broken, and who's making this place better despite it all. She leaned back slightly, still cautious. And what happens after that? Then I fix what needs fixing. With your help if you're willing. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for a rag and started wiping down the counter again. I'll hold you to that. That afternoon, Wesley jumped back behind the prep line. He didn't hover, he didn't give speeches. He just worked restocking sauces, refilling the to-go bags when they ran low, and keeping an eye on the pace. When the register glitched out during a payment, he crouched down and helped Brandy reset it. She didn't thank him, but she didn't stop him either. At 3:30, a delivery came late. The driver looked flustered, sweat on his forehead, hands shaking slightly as he handed Brandy the tablet to sign. They had me do a double route today, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Sorry, this order should have been here at noon. Brandy looked at the boxes. We're missing 2 cases of almond milk and a third of the sandwich rolls. The driver checked his manifest. They were loaded on the truck, I swear. Wesley stepped forward. You okay, man? You look like you've been running all day. The driver nodded, but the exhaustion in his eyes said otherwise. Started at 6, been to 11 stops. Wesley took the clipboard. Go sit out front for a minute, I'll call the supply office. He walked into the back and dialed the supplier directly. After 5 minutes of pushing through holds and vague answers, he finally got someone who confirmed the warehouse had been short-staffed all week. We're rotating part-timers, the rep said on the line. Most locations are getting partial orders until we catch up. Wesley hung up, jaw tight. He walked back out and handed the driver a bottle of water from the fridge. Not your fault, we'll make do. The driver nodded, clearly grateful, and left. Wesley turned to Brandy. How many times has this happened? 3 this week, she said. We've been stretching inventory. Kyle told us to cut portions when it got tight. Wesley's eyes narrowed. He told you to underportion, not directly, more like just be smart about it, but we all knew what he meant. He didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the prep station and quietly adjusted the portion scale back to standard. Then he pulled Drew aside behind the walk-in cooler. I need your help, Wesley said. Don't worry, nothing extra. I just want to understand what's been happening on close. Drew crossed his arms. You mean the stuff Kyle used to ignore? I mean everything. What breaks down after hours when no one's watching? Drew thought for a second. Prep gets skipped, dishes pile up. Fridge inventory's off. Sometimes we find open product left out. Who's responsible for final checks? Kyle was. But he'd leave early half the time. Wesley nodded. From now on, I want you doing the walk-through every night. I'll pay you shift lead rate for the extra time, but I want it done right. Drew didn't answer at first, then he nodded once. Yeah. All right. Back on the floor, Greg was helping a new hire, a quiet, soft-spoken teenager named Lewis, load the dishwasher. Greg didn't say much, but he showed him where the soap tabs went and how to stack the trays without cracking them. Wesley leaned against the doorway and watched for a moment. When Greg turned around, he saw him. Something wrong? No, just watching. You good training him, Greg shrugged. He listens, doesn't get in the way. Then keep going. I'm moving Lewis to mornings next week. He'll need more reps on prep. Greg didn't argue. At 5, Brandy started counting out the drawer. Wesley walked up beside her. I want to meet with everyone tonight, just 15 minutes after close. She glanced at the clock. There's a high school group that usually comes in around 6. If it's slow after that, we can wrap early. Sounds good. The rush came as expected. Loud teens, mismatched orders, a spilled soda, but this time Wesley saw something different. Drew didn't snap when the register glitched again. Greg stepped in to help when 2 wraps went missing. Even Lewis caught a dropped pan before it hit the floor. At 7:45, the last customer left. Wesley locked the door, flipped the sign, then he gathered the team near the front counter. I'm not going to pretend everything's fixed, he began, but I saw a lot today. And what I saw was a team trying to hold this place together with duct tape and willpower. Nobody interrupted. You were overworked, undersupported, and ignored by the person who was supposed to lead you. That ends now. He looked at each of them in turn. Greg, I'm moving you into a lead trainer role. You're methodical. You don't waste time. I want you showing new hires how things run. Greg raised an eyebrow, and that comes with a raise, yes. Wesley turned to Drew. Start logging night reports. Any issues, send them directly to me. We'll set you up with a clean reporting line. No more sending things into a void. Drew nodded once. He looked at Brandy. You've been holding this place together. You're not just a cashier, you're the glue. I want you managing this location, officially. Brandy blinked. I didn't. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. You are, and you'll have full support, training, staffing, everything. We'll bring in someone to help until we get a full-time assistant under you. She didn't respond right away. Lewis nudged her gently with his elbow. She glanced at him, then back at Wesley. Okay, she said, voice steady. I'll do it. Wesley nodded. Good, we'll talk more tomorrow. For now, go home. Get some rest. As the team trickled out, Wesley stayed behind, wiping the counter slowly. The silence was heavier now, but in a different way. He looked around the café, the mismatched chairs, the worn tiles, the faded menu board. It all still needed work. But the people were starting to believe again, and that was the first thing worth rebuilding. Wesley arrived early again the next morning, well before the lights inside the café flicked on. He didn't knock, he had a key now. He'd made that decision on the drive over. If he was going to fix this place, he wasn't going to do it halfway. The air inside still held the faint scent of coffee grounds and toasted bread from the day before. He made his way behind the counter, fired up the equipment, and began restocking the prep station. The quiet didn't last long. Brandy walked in 10 minutes later, her hair still damp from a rushed shower, a notebook tucked under her arm. She stopped short when she saw him stacking trays. You beat me to it, she said, dropping her bag in the corner. Figured I'd get ahead of the opening list, Wesley replied, not looking up. You sleep at all? Couple hours, head still spinning. He handed her a clean cloth. That's normal, it'll settle. She nodded, then opened her notebook. I've got a list of things we need. Not just supplies, things we've been missing for a while. Thermometers, updated allergen charts, 2 of the cutting boards are warped. Wesley motioned toward the back. Office is open, use the computer. Put in a requisition order directly. I'll approve it before lunch. She looked at him, surprised. No middleman? No delays, he said. Not anymore. By the time Drew and Lewis arrived, the café was taking shape. Lewis looked more confident, tying his apron without glancing at anyone. Drew gave a short nod toward Wesley, then disappeared into the back to start the morning prep. Greg showed up last, carrying a small toolbox. Where'd you get that? Wesley asked. Had it at home. Figured I'd fix that loose fridge handle before it snaps off completely. Wesley stepped aside. Be my guest. The first wave of customers came through the doors closer to 9. A few familiar faces, regulars who knew the rhythm of the place. But something about the rhythm had changed. Lewis handled his first solo transaction at the register. Brandy stayed close, watching without hovering. When an elderly woman struggled to hear him, he leaned in gently, repeated her order without raising his voice. She left smiling. Wesley stayed behind the line, alternating between prep and grill, letting Brandy handle the front. She moved with quiet authority, redirecting Lewis when he fumbled the muffin display, checking Drew's line when orders started to bottleneck. At 10:30, a woman in a navy pantsuit walked in with a clipboard under her arm. Her heels clicked against the tile floor. She stopped at the counter and glanced around, noting the team, the layout, the cleanliness. "Morning," she said. "I'm from the health department, surprise inspection." Brandy stepped forward immediately. "Of course, I'll walk you through." Wesley stayed back watching. No one panicked. Drew wiped down his counter. Greg closed the cabinet where he'd stashed his tools. Lewis stood quietly, hands behind his back. The inspector asked about temperature logs. Brandy pulled them from a folder near the office. She asked about allergen signage. Brandy pointed to the laminated sheet above the prep sink. The woman made notes, asked to see the fridge. Greg opened it for her, gesturing toward the thermometer inside. "We replaced this one 3 days ago. The old one was sticking." Wesley watched the inspector nod slowly. 15 minutes later, she signed her report and handed it to Brandy. "Cleanest location I've seen this week," she said. "And organized too, keep it that way." Brandy smiled, almost cautiously. "We will." When the door closed behind her, Wesley exhaled. "She didn't even ask to see the bathrooms," Lewis said. "Let's not get cocky," Brandy replied, but her voice was lighter. At noon, the line stretched past the door. This time, no one flinched. Greg called out orders with a steady cadence. Lewis moved with more speed, no longer second-guessing the screen. Drew didn't mutter or roll his eyes when Brandy redirected a sandwich that had the wrong sauce. He just remade it. Wesley stepped back, drying his hands on a towel. "You seeing this?" he asked quietly. Brandy glanced around. "Feels different, because it is." At 1, a man in a gray fleece vest came in, middle-aged with a Bluetooth earpiece and a folder tucked under his arm. He walked to the counter, glanced around, and leaned toward Brandy. "I'm here on behalf of the leasing group," he said. "I've got a few questions about the upcoming renewal. Is the manager available?" Brandy straightened. "That's me," he blinked. "Oh, I was told Kyle, he's no longer with the company," she said evenly. The man shifted, glancing toward Wesley as if to confirm. Wesley nodded. "Brandy is the new general manager. Any questions go through her." The man hesitated, then opened his folder. "All right. Well, we were reviewing tenant behavior and foot traffic. There were a few complaints logged last quarter, mostly noise and trash behind the building." "I'm not saying it's all on you, but," Brandy cut him off, politely but firmly. "We've cleaned up the delivery area. I've spoken with the vendors about stacking crates properly. The trash logs are updated, and we've posted guidelines in the alley. If there's anything else, I'm happy to handle it." The man blinked again, then smiled faintly. "Well, all right then." He handed her a business card and left without another word. Wesley turned to her once the door shut. "Handled better than I would have." "I've had practice," she said simply. At 3, Wesley gathered the team in the back, not a meeting, just a pause. "I'm heading back to the main office tomorrow," he said. "But I'm not disappearing. I'll be checking in weekly. And I'll be reading every nightly report, every supply request, and every incident log." Greg leaned against the sink. "So this was temporary. This visit?" "Yes, but the changes aren't." Drew crossed his arms. "What happens when the next manager slacks off?" Wesley looked at him. "Then they're out. No grace period, no excuses." Lewis shifted nervously. "Am I staying on?" Brandy answered before Wesley could. "You've earned your spot. We'll train you up properly. You've got potential." Wesley nodded. "I'll make sure you get the hours." He looked at all of them. "You kept this place going through neglect. That won't happen again. You've got the tools now, the support, the authority. Use it." No one spoke, but no one looked away either. That night, Wesley stood by the door as the team filtered out. Drew gave him a nod. Greg just lifted his toolbox in one hand like a salute. Lewis offered a quiet thanks before slipping out. Brandy was last. She paused by the door, keys in hand. "You sure you're ready to hand this off?" she asked. "I'm not handing it off," Wesley replied. "I'm sharing it." You've got the wheel now, but I'm still watching the road. She gave a quiet laugh, small, genuine, then she locked the door behind her and walked into the night. Wesley stood there a moment longer, looking out at the empty sidewalk. The café wasn't perfect. The walls still needed repainting and the menus needed updating. But inside, the place finally had what mattered: accountability, leadership, and people who gave a damn. That was enough for now.